What happens when a lifetime of addiction is actually masked for something even more profound and debilitating? Could a recent change in psychiatric medication be the missing link in understanding a tragedy that seems to have no motive? Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Rob Reiner family tragedy. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes. I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Since we last discussed the tragic deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner, new information has emerged that shifts our psychological focus from addiction to a possible clinical diagnosis of schizophrenia. Reports from sources including TMZ and the Los Angeles Times indicate that Nick Reiner had been diagnosed with schizophrenia prior to the events of December 14, 2025. This raises a massive psychological question. Was the violence a result of a personality defect or a catastrophic failure of medical stabilization? One of the most jarring new details involves Nick's behavior in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. A family friend reportedly shared that Nick's doctors had recently changed his medication, a transition that left him appearing out of his head and mentally unstable. In the mental health field, we know that switching antipsychotic medications is a period of extreme vulnerability. If a patient is taken off one stabilizer before another has reached therapeutic levels, they can fall into a psychotic gap where reality becomes distorted. How often is a person's perceived dangerousness actually a side effect of a brain trying to calibrate to a new chemistry? This leads us to a critical red flag: the overlap between substance use and severe mental illness, often called a dual diagnosis. While Nick was open about his stays in rehab for heroin addiction, experts now suggest the drug use may have masked the early symptoms of schizophrenia. It's common for individuals in the phase of schizophrenia to use substances to quiet the onset of hallucinations or disorganized thoughts. If the addiction was the only thing being treated for 2 decades, the underlying schizophrenia may have been left to fester until it reached a breaking point. Is it possible that every rehab stay Nick had was actually failing because it was targeting the symptom rather than the disease? New court updates provide a haunting look at Nick's current mental state following his arrest. On Wednesday, December 17, Nick made his first court appearance in downtown Los Angeles. He appeared behind a glass partition, wearing a blue suicide prevention smock, which is a significant indicator of his perceived risk of self-harm. When asked if he waived his right to a speedy arraignment, he spoke only 3 words in a calm, clear voice: "Yes, Your Honor." This flat affect, a lack of emotional reactivity, is a hallmark symptom of schizophrenia, but is often misinterpreted by the public as cold or remorseless. Can a person truly feel remorse if they are currently detached from the reality of their own actions? His high-profile defense attorney, Alan Jackson, has since postponed the formal arraignment until January 7, 2026. This delay is likely to allow for the comprehensive psychiatric evaluation to determine if Nick is even competent to stand trial. Under California law, a defendant must understand the nature of the proceedings and be able to assist in their own defense. If Nick was in a state of active psychosis during the commission of the crime, the legal focus will shift from punishment to psychiatric commitment. What does justice look like when the perpetrator is a victim of their own neurological breakdown? We are also learning more about the family's desperate attempts to intervene before that final Saturday night. Reports suggest that Nick was not even invited to Conan O'Brien's holiday party, but his parents brought him because they were too afraid to leave him home alone. This reveals a heartbreaking psychological hypervigilance that Rob and Michelle were living with every day. They weren't just parents. They were acting as 24/7 crisis managers for a son whose reality was slipping away. Did their dedication to not giving up unknowingly place them in a path of a storm that no amount of love could stop? Another red flag surfaced from Nick's own past interviews that have been revisited since his arrest. In a 2016 podcast, Nick described a ruse he used at a rehab facility in New Jersey, where he threw a rock through a window just to prove he was crazy so they would give him medication. At the time, it was framed as antics of a rebellious addict, but through a current lens, it looks like the cry for help from someone who felt their own internal chaos wasn't being taken seriously. When a person reveals that they have to act out to get medical attention, it indicates a profound lack of trust in the systems meant to save them. Could this long-standing resentment toward clinical experts have contributed to a final violent rejection of all authority? As we look toward the January court dates, the case is becoming a study in the insanity defense and its complexities. District Attorney Nathan Hochman has stated that while the death penalty is an option for multiple murders, no decision has been made yet. The psychological analysis of this case will hinge on whether Nick was capable of forming malice aforethought or if he was acting under a delusional command. The evidence of a recent medication switch and a prior schizophrenic diagnosis will be central to this determination. We must ask ourselves, if the system failed to stabilize a man with the resources of the Reiner family, what hope is there for those with nothing? The clues were there. The erotic social behavior, the history of homelessness, the failed treatments, and finally, the biological tinderbox of a medication change. Piecing these together, we see a story not of a celebrity scandal, but a medical tragedy that ended in the most violent way possible. The aha moment in this analysis is a realization that addiction was likely just the tip of the iceberg, hiding a much larger, much dangerous psychiatric struggle. This is a case that has gotten a lot of attention. You know that. You've been watching the news. It's everywhere. Rob Reiner was very famous, very wealthy. So when something like this happens, it gets really pushed out into the media. But there's so many things behind the scenes we don't realize, we don't know. And unless you are parents to have a child who has addiction and a mental illness, you'll have no idea what it's like. I did a video about this earlier, about this tragedy, and there are people who comment so many bad things about both Nick and the Reiners. And the truth is, we don't really have all the story. There's always another side of the coin. It's easy for us to make a judgment and judge people, but we have to pause and take a step back and realize that there are a lot of deeper issues going on. I want us to look at this case as an example of the importance of getting help. If Nick had schizophrenia all along, it doesn't seem like he got the help that he needed. He went to rehabs, but it sounds like the rehabs were mainly for his addiction, and the schizophrenia went unnoticed. That's a tragedy, and we need to fix that. We need to do more about destigmatizing schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. We need to do a better job of having compassion and not judging others. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you with the new information? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.